Hello everyone, another episode of First Fire Orders. Second time of this episode for me because the first recording was so crackly I've had to do it again. You can see a new microphone there, so hopefully the sound will be good and I haven't messed up all the filters, etc, etc. But let's get on with it. Like I said at the start of my last video, I enjoy making up army lists almost as much as I enjoy actually playing. And I don't have the books yet, but of course other people do. And so I'm able to look at all the Legion traits and talk a bit about them. Now, I've also said previously that I'm planning to almost certainly paint Blood Angels. And this one, though, is one game where soup might actually make sense within reason. So I'll think about soup as a factor when I'm talking about each of these traits. I'm also going to just try and keep this to a reasonable length, so I'm going to stick to just the Loyalist traits. Now, of course, you can use any Legion on either side, with the exception of Word Bearers generally. That one's going a bit too far, I think, for just about everyone. But, you know, there seem to be as many Loyalist Iron Warriors as there are Traitor ones. Sometimes I wonder whether Perturabo even has anyone actually left to command for himself, because they're all fighting against him. There you go, though. That's tough on him. So I'll talk about how they're going to work individually, how they're going to work in collaboration with other legions, and try and come up with what might be a sensible army list without doing it purely from a power gaming angle. Right, so the first legion is the Dark Angels, and that's where I'm going to start. They are following the hexagrammaton rule. We've heard of that before in other related games. This time it means that if a formation has 3 or more detachments, but they're all infantry, those infantry are going to gain the Phosphex rule, which is going to be helpful as they try and attack buildings, and the Implacable rule, which is going to help them avoid running away, fairly obviously. If they have 3 different detachments and they're all cavalry, they're going to get outflank. And if a formation has 3 detachments that are all vehicles, they're going to get the nimble rule. Now, that is going to mean that to make the most of the hexagrammaton rule, you're going to have to do a certain amount of list tailoring. And it's going to be tough to build a balanced Dark Angels force that can actually take advantage of its special rules in smaller points games. But that is incredibly thematic. The Dark Angels, after all, were the first legion, and they're the template on which other legions were all built. So they're used to taking things on single-handedly. They're meant to be the sort of all-rounders. And I think that gives you a bit of a risk that you could land up making a jack-of-all-trades list with Dark Angels, but master of none. It's going to be hard to say how good they're going to be right now until we start playing, but I certainly don't think it's going to be bad. And, you know, Dark Angels in Rogue Trader era and now in 30k were pretty cool. It's only where they get into 40k, I think they start being a little bit silly in some ways. Nevertheless, you're going to have an army, if you go for a mono build here, that can have some outflank, it can have something to help you deal with structures, and vehicles that are probably going to stick around a little bit longer. So they should be solid. Number 2 in the Loyalist list is the White Scars, and they get Born in the Saddle. Now this improves their jinx saves by 1. And that seems really, really specific. It seems as if only cavalry are going to get any benefit from that. Maybe there's going to be some specialist units that can give other things jink, but I'm not really sure about that. And so I'm not sure how I feel about this one. If we see White Scars, I think we're going to run a lot of jet bikes and speeders and that type of thing in the list, which is incredibly thematic. Maybe jinx saves are going to be more common than we think. Maybe White Scars will have a way of giving things a jinx save from other units that come out in the future. Who knows? But, you know, as I say, I'm not sure about this one. Not sure how I feel about it. I would be thinking maybe what we're going to see is White Scars as one formation in an army which actually contains other legions as well. Now, for number 3, we have Space Wolves, who get preternatural senses, which says the enemy cannot infiltrate within 16 inches of any Space Wolf models, and they can't outflank within 8 inches of any Space Wolf models. This has taken a fair bit of stick in some previews. I'm not sure it's quite as bad as it sounds. For starters, it applies to all of your models. Now, in a mono Space Wolf list, that's going to push the enemy back a long way. In a Dawn of War deployment, they're going to be back to 8 inches from where they could normally deploy. And that's going to seriously hamper their ability to, do some early game shenanigans in certain ways. It doesn't completely prevent outflank, but by being careful with how you're moving your Space Wolf units around, you can get pretty damn close to shutting down outflank. And you might even get people who realise they're about to face a Space Wolf's army and give up on the idea of outflanking at all. Even if you wanted to take just one unit of one detachment of wolves in a soup list and you put your wolves on one flank and push the enemy back on that side and shut down outflank over there, that can at least protect one of your flanks and give you some serious options about how you want to deal with the rest of the board as well. Doesn't immediately sound as good as some of the others, but it offers a lot of board control against many, many lists, and that can sometimes win you the game. Imperial Fists for number 4 get Disciplined Fire, and this has been given a thumbs up, largely speaking. It does come with a few drawbacks though. First of all, when infantry, who are armed with bolters, combi bolters, bolt pistols, missile launchers, las cannons, and auto cannons, are put on first fire orders, they get accurate. Now, that certainly isn't a bad thing, but it is, a bit specific. First of all, it means your dreadnoughts, vehicles, and cavalry get no benefit from it. A little bit like the White Scars, it might mean that you're going to want a lot of one type of unit, or it might mean that you don't want to use Imperial Fists as a mono Imperial Fists list. And again, I don't know how I feel about that. It certainly isn't a bad trait, and it's very fluffy, but some people are going to be wanting to see lists built from just one legion. And legion number 5 is the Blood Angels, who have Encarmine Fury, which at first glance seems to be pretty amazing. And I'm not going to say it's bad, certainly. You get to win combat and move 3 inches again, and you can uniquely move into combat for a second time if the opponent you move into hasn't yet fought. Now, it's important to realise this applies to all Blood Angels models, and it immediately sounds like a really good option. An extra 3 inches alone might be very good anyway before you even get to fight twice, which sounds really impressive. It's going to give you the ability to wipe out enemy formations in one go instead of having to wait for another round of combat, risk them potentially moving away from you, something else intervening, etc., etc. And there is one thing I want to point out, though. It doesn't actually make you better at combat. It just lets you do more of it. Now, for that reason, Blood Angels are really going to want to load up on models with a high close assault factor. Dreadnoughts do seem like the obvious choice. I've already got it in mind that I'm going to load up a Thunderhawk gunship with Dreadnoughts and send them for some sort of priority target. Even recognising that it just adds more rounds of combat rather than makes you better at combat still seems like it's really powerful. Iron Hands, the 6th Loyalist Legion, get Inviolate Armour, and that means they have feel no pain against light anti-tank weapons as well as light weapons. Now, that sounds like a reason to load up with as many sources of apothecaries as possible, which, as I understand it, is commander stands. On top of that, though, their vehicles that are on first fire orders have incoming fire counting as 1 worse armor penetration until or unless those vehicles overwatch. Now, that sounds to me like you're going to want to have a core of infantry for your Iron Hands, but that after that, you're probably going to want to add a lot of vehicles. An Iron Hands armoured company sounds like an obvious choice. It's not as single-minded as some legions, but Dreadnoughts and Cavalry might not feature as much in Iron Hands list as other models do. Now, for number 7s, you might expect this. They have a combined arms approach, and their trait interlocking tactics does feed into that. It says that you can re-roll 1s for shooting if the target detachment has already been hit by another model from the same detachment. Now, it's the sort of rule that potentially benefits any unit in the game, and it can be huge for some units. But note the rule specifies that the first and second shooter have to come from the same formation, not just from the same army. So fewer, larger formations are likely to be the order of the day for Ultramarines. And you'll want to make sure that your opponents keep track of which models are from which detachment as well, and which formation as well. And I think Ultramarines are going to lend themselves to being at least the bulk of an army with one big formation. Now, the Salamanders, our 8th Loyalist Legion here, have a trait called Strength of Will. And it seems, if I'm honest, quite dull. However, I think it might turn out to be a really important one. All Salamanders models are implacable, and they roll 2d6 for their morale and keep one of those 2 dice. Now, I can see this being another Legion who are good to take as a mono build. Over the course of a battle, you're going to see a lot of differences made by having units stick around when they'd otherwise run. And it might be something that makes the difference between hanging on to contest an important objective or let the enemy take it all together. When I was young, actually, I bounced between a few legions in the 1991 version of Space Marine, and this trait almost makes me want to use these as an army. I think I'm set on Blood Angels, but, you know, Salamanders could be the solid core and really be the sort of type of army that sticks around and gets the job done, even if they're not killing quite as much as other people. And our final Loyalist Legion for me to talk about, this is number 9, is the Raven Guard, who get by Wing and Talon. And this one helps several types of units, so it might again lend itself well to armies that include very few vehicles, but plenty of the other stuff. Detachments of infantry only are going to get Infiltrate. If you have cavalry or walkers or infantry with dedicated transports, or I think any sort of transports, they're going to get Forward Deployment. Now, that obviously gives a lot of board control from the very start of the game. This feels like it could be the best Legion trait to me. Although you'll be putting your models in harm's way, being able to get up the board quicker and occupy prime structures means you'll really take some shifting when you get there. All of that, of course, is as long as you're not playing Space Wolves. Luckily, for most of the time, Raven Guard and Space Wolves are going to be on the same side. Now, seeing as we're going to need multiple formations to play at 2,000 or 3,000 points, I don't think we should feel bad about mixing up our formations. As the war ground on, and especially once it reached Terra, forces often found themselves fighting alongside other legions. In fact, from the earliest days on Istvan V, Loyalist legions were fighting in tandem. We've all talked about shattered legions when the Raven Guard and the Iron Hands and Salamanders were forced in some situations to work together. And traitor legions were even doing it from Istvan III. Now, I don't think we should be looking down on players who do use more than one legion in their army. And maybe we should celebrate people who do stick to just one legion, but I'm not sure I'm going to be that critical of people who decide they want a bit of a mix, as long as it feels like there's a reason and it's not just about making the most powerful list they possibly can. So I think we'll see Soup. And I'd almost like to see a name other than Soup, because that sounds a bit derogatory, like Cheese or Beardy. Maybe someone will come up with something. And in those sort of Soup lists, though, I do think some obvious combinations stand out. In those Soup lists, though, I do think some obvious choices stand out. The Raven Guard and Iron Hands will complement each other. For example, Raven Guard don't get any benefits for vehicles, and Iron Hands mainly get benefits for vehicles. So an initial thrust from a Raven Guard infantry-based demi company backed up by an Iron Hands armoured company would make huge sense and fit the history of the game we play. Some Blood Angels in an aerial assault, backing up some garrisoned boys in yellow, would make complete sense. And it wouldn't be unthematic for some White Scars to sweep in from the flanks as the Blood Angels come down from above. That's something I think would make a lot of sense and really feel like you're actually playing part of the war that has been described in the books during the Siege of Terra series, as exactly that's happened throughout all those pages. Now, talking about it in terms of rules, though, if I had to speculate, I think White Scars, Blood Angels, Imperial Fists, and Iron Hands might see use mainly as a single formation in a combined Legion list. I think Dark Angels, Ultramarines, Salamanders, and Space Wolves might often be the dominant force in a list, maybe not on their own, but maybe the predominant part of the army. Whilst Raven Guard, I think, might be just as often the main part of an army as they are a supplementary force supporting another legion. I think mass infiltration and forward deployment can be really powerful, But I think even just as a small part of another list, it can be really helpful to move something up the board really early in the game. Anyway, I still can't wait. I'm sure I'm going to have fun whatever I do. And many things are going to become clearer as this game evolves. I think we're only a week away from actually getting our hands on the box set, unless you're one of those lucky people who got some of it already. I don't want to talk too much about the word meta because I think it's a horrible word, but that's essentially what we're looking for, to see what meta evolves. And I don't want to see people getting obsessed over the most powerful lists, but I do think we all want to play with an army that can do a job. And I'm certainly going to make sure that I'm not hamstrung before the game even starts because I've built a terrible list. It's just not fun for your opponent either to completely steamroller you. I'm looking forward to changing how I go as well. I know that in Horus Heresy at 28mm, I built a list and realised at a certain stage, hang on a minute, my list is way too slow to get out of the deployment zone. And I looked at certain jump troops and faster moving troops and infiltrating troops to give myself a better chance of doing things well. And I'm sure that might happen in this game as well. Not in the same way, of course, but realizations, I need more of this or more of that. Anyway, if you think you need to, please tell me I'm an idiot down below. Please tell me I'm an idiot anyway, because I'm pretty sure that's going to feed the algorithm. But especially if I actually got something wrong. Don't do a thumbs down. Just call me an idiot. I'm fine with that. I'm a teacher. I get called an idiot all the time. It's absolutely normal for me. But if I've got something wrong or if I've missed something obvious, please tell me because I want to think about these things before it's too late. Anyway, we are going to be recording Tale of Four Gamers again soon. And that's obviously on Arbiter Ian's channel. He by now should be over 100,000 subscribers. I'm still on slightly over 300, so I'm catching up. But yeah, where you're actually going to probably see this the most is on Arbiter Ian's channel as we build our armies, and look forward to speaking to some of you on the Discord if you're on Arbiter Ian's Discord, etc., etc. Anyway, take care, bye, and I'll speak to you soon about the Traitor Legion traits.